So I actually got started doing animation on my own when I got to visit the Disney Studio. And what happened is I was spending just inordinate amounts of time drawing, and no one in my family is an artist. My parents understand nothing about art, and my mother, watching me spending so much time drawing, was actually a little concerned that, is there anything to this, or is he just wasting his time? And so she, on her own, she didn't even tell me this, she took some of my drawings and sent them to the Disney Studio and wrote them a letter asking about this. And they said, they wrote back, and actually a man who was, I forget his title, like general manager. He ran the studio managerially. He wasn't an artist. And his name was Donald Duckwall. And he left the studio before I started there. But so he wrote back inviting us. He said, when you're ever in the Los Angeles area, you're welcome to come visit us. So the following summer, my folks worked out a vacation. We visited Universal Studios and whatnot. And we visited the Disney Studio. And by then, this was in 1973, so it was a much smaller mom and pop studio. Basically there was a guard that let us in, and beyond that we got to walk freely all through the studio. So we met with Mr. Duckwall, and he had somebody else show me around, actually Ed Hansen, who ended up becoming my boss. And he was far nicer to me there than he was when he was my boss. But they showed me all around. I got to meet a number of animators, and I thought, I am in heaven. I want to work here. And so I came home, and my father bought me a used Super 8 camera and built a little light box for me. And I just started working, animating on typing paper, and just trial and error. And I would spend months doing a little roll of Super 8 film. And then I would look at it and see what works, what didn't work, and I just kept at it, and I was hooked. And I would write Mr. Duckwall back saying that when I start working at the Disney Studio, and he would write back, no, I never promised you a job here, and whatnot, but I eventually did get a job there. Yeah, so I spent 3 years at CalArts, and I was really fortunate. Some of the teachers that we had, most of the teachers were ex-Disney people. We had Ken O'Connor, a layout artist, and worked on all the great classic films. We also had a design teacher who hated Disney. Basically, we learned as far as animation is concerned, we learned more from each other, the students, showing each other stuff, and we would experiment, and we would see what the others are doing, and wow, that worked, that's great. So, and some of the upperclassmen, I remember Tim Burton was a sophomore when I was in my freshman year. There were John Lasseter was a senior my freshman year. A lot of other really good animators, people in my class. There's Brian McEntee, Mark Dindal, Mark Henn, Tony DeRosa, a lot of these people that we all ended up working at Disney. In my second year, I really wanted to, there's kind of an interesting story here. I really wanted to work at the Disney Studio. And so the way the school year was is that you work on your own film, which of course takes the majority of your time. You had other projects to do, layout, color, design work and whatnot, and storyboards. But your film is your end of the year project, and you spent the whole school year working on it, and you hope to get it done. And they also taught us, keep it simple, don't think big story, think more of a situation. So you have time on your animation, not finishing a 5-minute film or longer. So, and I heard that, but it never really sank in. So instead of doing a 90-second film, I did a 5.5-minute film. And another person in my class was Joe Ramft, who the great story artist who tragically died some years back. And so another thing, at the end of the year, they have a producer show. And what they do is they link, so this was actual film. This is long before working digitally existed. So they simply cut every film together from freshman year all the way up through senior year, and with a little black leader in between, and they would just run them all. And the freshman film had no sound, and then the sophomore year on through senior had sound. And they just ran one film right after another, and this would go for about 3 hours. And the poor producers watching this from all the various studios, so they had this producer show at the end of the year. And so they would watch these, and the majority of them, of course, were awful. And but I really thought I had a good film my second year, and good enough to be chosen by Disney to work there. And so, unfortunately, I had the misfortune of having my film placed directly after Joe Ranft. And Joe's film was exactly what they asked for. It was short, concise, simple story, simple situation, and it was hilarious. And so when his film, people were laughing and laughing, and then his film ended, you had some credits, and then there was 15 seconds of black leader in between, and people were still laughing. Then my film started, and people were still chuckling at Joe's, and then gradually they kind of got into my film, and there was basically 5 minutes of pure silence. And I was in hell. I wanted to dig a hole and bury myself in it. And I came to realize that my film was not that good. And I realized how important storytelling was, when really all I wanted to do was animate, and almost to the point where I didn't care what the character was doing. I just loved the motion of it. And it took me a long time to really realize how important story is. And really, as far as Disney is concerned, that's what had set them apart from other studios, that it wasn't just funny gags. There were real story and real characters underneath that. So my third year, I really took that to heart and did a much simpler story. It was funny. I really dealt with the characters. And at the end of the year, I was offered a job at the Disney studio. I was also really fortunate that Eric Larson, one of the 9 Old Men, was still at the studio. He ran a training program. And so for, I think was it 6 months, I think, that he worked with us. And there was a whole group from CalArts. I think there were 9 of us that were hired. And so we learned a lot from Eric, and then we were put on Mickey's Christmas Carol, which was in production at the time. So, and we were all in-betweeners on that.